Who issues the loading order? The loading order is normally communicated to the vessel's master by email from the owner or operator or charterers. Why are the implications of receiving an early loading order more important for chemical, product and gas carriers than for crude oil tankers? The loading order is the basic information needed in order to prepare the vessel for loading. The loading order may vary depending on several factors. For example, the ship is trading worldwide in the spot market, trading worldwide on a time charter party, or trading as a shuttle tanker on time charter in a fixed area, etc. Requirements for the notification of notice of readiness, laytime, etc. may vary. For crude oil carriers, the practical implications of receiving an early loading order rather than a late are less important compared with chemical, product and gas carriers. Crude oil tankers do not have to prepare the tanks, like water washing, gas freeing and inspecting the tanks for cleanliness, re-inerting or cooling down the tanks, etc., prior to loading the next cargo. In which event can the ship owner lose money because of not having all cargo tanks empty on arrival? When a crude oil tanker has carried out cargo tank cleaning during the ballast voyage, there will be slops and residues collected and stored in one slop tank. If there is any doubt about retaining the slops, the master must communicate this question to the owners and cargo owner or charterers and request their advice. Most charter parties provide for the charterer to make the decision regarding the disposition of slops. If the characteristic of the slop oil and the nature of the next cargo permit, the slops may be retained on board and the next cargo loaded on top of them. This is normally done with crude oil cargoes when the same or similar crude will be carried on the next voyage. The charterer may wish to load on top, or lot, in which case full freight will be normally paid. Charterers may require the slops to be discharged. The time required to do this normally constitutes laytime used. If the charterer does not wish to load on top, the slops must be segregated and freight will not be paid to the ship owner on the space or deadweight used. A normal procedure in such cases, and in order to load full deadweight, is that the slop is sold and the vessel deslopped to a slop barge prior to loading. What is the difference between a loading and a voyage order? The difference between a loading order and a voyage order is: a voyage order is an instruction from the owner or operator or charterers to the vessel's master about where the vessel shall sail after completion of a port call. Even if the next cargo is not settled yet, the vessel needs some kind of instruction on where to sail. For instance, proceed to outer anchorage, drop anchor and wait for further order, or proceed to Fujairah for order, etc. The loading order is the specific instruction to proceed to a port or terminal and load a specific cargo, or several grades of cargo and quantity. The loading order also includes an indication of the discharge port or area, which need to be considered with respect to draft and air draft restrictions during the voyage and at discharge port. Based on the loading order, the loading plan is worked out by the chief officer. What is the main purpose of the pre-arrival meeting conducted by the master? A pre-arrival meeting is performed in different ways, depending on the vessel's trade. The master normally conducts the meeting, and the main purpose of the meeting is to ensure that all officers and crew are acquainted with the time schedule and activities expected to take place during the port call. Through this time schedule framework, the risk assessments associated with each in-port activity and the ship's plan for mitigating each of those risks is communicated. The contingency plan, which is the result of risk assessments, should be highlighted in the meeting. Besides the main purpose of a port call, loading or discharging, Other activities can be STS lightering, special security measurements, crew change, stores and provisions, bunkering, external technical service for the vessel's equipment, various external inspections, etc. In addition, crude oil carriers are frequently involved in ship-to-ship, STS, transfer operations, either for loading or discharge. STS operations are labour-demanding, and because of their nature, subject to special MARPO regulations. Who is responsible for making the loading plan? As soon as the loading order is received, the chief officer, who is responsible for making the loading plan, starts to pre-plan and work out a preliminary loading plan. What does the loading plan consist of? The loading plan is a comprehensive and detailed schedule that comprises a time bar, which begins at the start of the planned loading and describes the precise steps to be taken, which cargo tanks to start loading in, the tank ullages at which to stop and change over to other tanks, and which ballast tanks to deballast from in a sequence of stages until the completion of the operation. The ship's draft fore and aft and the shearing force and bending moments on the hull when each stage is reached are calculated in advance using the loading computer and shown on the loading plan time bar. These calculated drafts and stresses ensure that the ship's hull remains within the permissible limits as prescribed in the class-approved loading manual. Throughout the operation, the indicated tank ullages help junior officers and the pumpman to know when a certain stage of the loading is reached, and the next steps should be taken. Comparing visual drafts with those shown in the plan helps the officers in ensuring that the loading is going safely according to the plan. The plan also shows cargo specifications and a tank diagram spreadsheet with details on cargo grades, quantity, and their distribution into different cargo tanks. Further, the plan details line and valve systems to be used and loading rates, starting rate, full rate, and topping off rate, as well as the deballasting schedule. The chief officer conducts a meeting with the junior officers, such as the second and third officer, pumpman, and boatswain, in due time prior to arrival. The purpose of this meeting is to have their acknowledgement of full understanding of the loading plan. Who must be familiar with the loading plan? The second and third officer are responsible duty deck officers during loading, and consequently need to be fully familiar with the vessel's cargo system. To assist them during the operation, they have the pumpman, who is a qualified technician and responsible for maintaining the cargo equipment. In addition, they have the boatswain, who is the leader of the deck crew. The loading plan made out by the chief officer prior to arrival must be considered as a preliminary plan, which cannot be completed until after the ship shore meeting. What is the purpose of the pre-arrival checklist? Since the introduction and implementation of the International Safety Management Code, or ISM Code, mandatory from 1998, ship owners or other companies responsible for operation of ships have had to develop and implement safety management systems, both for the ships and shore-based organization. The safety management objectives of the company should provide for safe practices in ship operation and systems to monitor and document onboard activities where needed. Checklists to document safe practices and compliances with rules and regulations, as well as the company's policy, have been developed and implemented as industry standard in connection with various operations on board. What should the ship's procedure aim for if negative answers are found for certain items in the checklist? The checklist must be completed in ample time prior to arrival, in order to allow for repairs of malfunctioning equipment or call for external service upon arrival. Any negative answers in the checklist must be reported to the owner or operator in order to make a common effort to ensure the vessel's safe and efficient port call without any delays. Who carries out the tasks? The pre-arrival checklist is a comprehensive record of preparations carried out in order to document that the vessel is arriving in a condition according to the company's policy and international rules and regulations. All junior officers, including the pumpman and boatswain, as well as the engine officers and crew, will be engaged in testing and checks in order to complete the pre-arrival checklist. In the engine, all the technical systems required by the checklist are to be tested, and the result reported back to the Chief Officer. These tests must include operation of the cargo and inert gas pipelines valve operating systems, hydraulic power packs or boilers for cargo pumps, inert gas systems, ballast and stripping pumps, and alarms and trips of all these. The junior deck officers are responsible for checking their designated equipment and systems, such as firefighting and life-saving equipment, navigational instrumentation, etc. The pumpman is responsible for function checking of all cargo-related safety systems and equipment. The boatswain with the deck crew must check and prepare all mooring equipment, oil pollution prevention equipment, accommodation ladders, pilot ladders, hose handling cranes, and deck scuppers, and assist the pumpman with preparation of the cargo manifolds to be used. What are the standard arrival procedures? When the vessel arrives at port, she passes through the standard activities: pilot on board, entering into port, and moving alongside terminal or SBM buoy assisted by tugboats. Who is responsible for the various tasks? As soon as information on which side alongside has been received, the boatswain and the crew make ready the moorings and, together with the pumpman, prepare the cargo manifolds. When well moored and the pilot and tugboats are off, the security checkpoint is established at the gangway, and the vessel's port watch system enters into force. When the vessel is cleared by quarantine and customs authorities, the loading master or terminal representative and cargo surveyors board the vessel. The cargo surveyors are representing the shippers and cargo owners or charterers. The loading master and his terminal staff or crew normally inspect the vessel's manifolds and mooring arrangement before connection of hoses or arms is initiated. From the vessel's side, the duty deck officer is now in charge of the activities on deck under the supervision of the Chief Officer. When berthed to an SBM for loading through floating hoses, the hose connection operation is more demanding and requires experienced hands in addition to supervision of a loading master or his assistant. What are the three main subjects that must be discussed and agreed to in a ship-shore meeting between the Chief Officer and the loading master? A ship-shore meeting is held in the Chief Officer's office or cargo control room, or CCR, or ship's conference room, for pre-transfer exchange of information. The three main areas covered are the loading plan, the safety, security and environment protection, and the communication and emergency stop procedures. Details of the ship's loading plan, usually also communicated before arrival, are discussed, and if in agreement with the terminal's plans, are finalized. The items normally revised and added will be the time schedule, including loading rates on starting and topping off, deballasting operation, ship and shore tank changeover, avoidance of contamination of cargo, and pipeline clearing on completion of loading. Safety, security and environmental protection regulations of the ship as well as the terminal are important matters to be discussed and agreed on. Finally, the communications channels and emergency stop procedures are explained and tested. Click on the buttons below to view detailed checklists for various areas to be covered in this ship-shore pre-transfer meeting. Information from tanker to terminal. Information from the terminal to the tanker. Agreed loading plan. Ship-shore safety checklist. Ship-shore radio communications test and emergency stops. Posted plans and placards. From the time the tanker is secured at berth, what is the normal sequence of activities until the cargo loading begins? The cargo loading normally commences according to the following procedure. Formalities with port authorities and terminal or loading master are completed. Cargo hoses arms well connected and unused manifold connections blanked. The vapor return line is connected. VOC system prepared. Cargo surveyors complete the tank survey. On-board quantity, or OBQ, is calculated. Lining up of lines and valves to be used, both onshore and on board, under the supervision of the Chief Officer and Loading Master. When lining up is completed, the Chief Officer reports to the Loading Master that the vessel is ready to receive cargo, except for manifold valves which still are closed. The Loading Master orders the vessel's manifold valves to be opened according to the agreed loading plan. When the manifold valves are confirmed open, the Loading Master orders loading to start, first with line displacement at reduced rate. The duty deck officer, pumpman and boatswain with deck crew must, during this sequence, check valves and lines in use to ensure that no malfunction or leaks have occurred when the cargo oil entered. To ensure that there is correct lineup of valves for drop lines, bottom lines and tank valves, the first cargo is taken into one tank at reduced rate. When confirmed that the oil flow is according to the loading plan, the remaining tanks are opened, and the loading rate is gradually increased. Junior deck officer is in charge of a cargo watch. Why can he not take all decisions independently? When the loading is well underway, the Chief Officer delegates the practical operation to the duty deck officer, pumpman and boatswain. The Chief Officer's standing order details the duty deck officer's obligation to inform the superiors in the event of incidents or accidents that may interfere with the operation, for instance oil leaks, breaking of moorings, thunderstorms, etc. In addition, the Chief Officer requires to be kept updated on the progress of the loading and any deviation from the loading plan, such as reduced loading rate or stoppages initiated by shore, etc. The need to inform superiors whenever in doubt is to prevent one-man errors during the operation, and to use the best experience available to address unforeseen risks which may occur from time to time, and which have not been allowed for in the plan. The need to record all events to serve as evidence in case of legal disputes later, how does keeping of records help in the operation of the tanker? The duty deck officer is responsible for recording all activities in the timesheet, which is one of the official documents to be enclosed with the final cargo documents. He is also responsible for recording all items required by the deck log, and to make regular checks and printouts of the vessel's condition according to the loading computer. Besides legal requirements, a good recording helps to review the operation in a debriefing after completion, and for continuously improving plans to be made by the ship's team. Emergency action must be taken by personnel on duty without waiting for the Chief Officer to come and take charge. In case of an emergency, the duty deck officer, pumpman and boatswain must be familiar with the first response action to be taken, and the sequence of alerting as per the ship shore safety checklist and emergency telephone list. Emergency response. Click on the button to learn more. To the transfer operations while loading is in progress when the tide is low. As the sea level goes down with the tide and the vessel goes down deeper into the water due to cargo being loaded, the mooring ropes become slack. It is then possible that the vessel may move several meters off the berth. The duty deck officer, in cooperation with the boatswain and the deck watchman, are responsible for adjusting the mooring ropes as the vessel changes draft and trim, and as an effect of tide. If the terminal's loading arms come under strain, it will become necessary to stop the cargo transfer and tighten the mooring ropes until the vessel is secure alongside again. Should the junior officers and crew be aware of vapor emissions from oil cargoes and their control systems? The junior officers must be familiar with the operation of the vessel's vapor emission control system. Although it is mandatory to equip crude oil tankers with either a vapor return system or volatile emission control system, at present only a few terminals are equipped to receive the vapor in return from ships. Vapours emitted from oil cargo are toxic and can harm human health. Emissions into the atmosphere are also prohibited by law in more and more ports around the world. For Volatile Emission Control System, VOC, see Seagull's CBT number 0196. Since pollution by oil is no longer a threat from ballast water, what is the reason for increased regulations and controls when deballasting? Since the introduction of double-hulled crude oil tankers, where the ballast water is carried in the double-hull side tanks and completely segregated from the cargo tanks, the risk of oil pollution has been reduced dramatically. The old single-hulled crude oil tankers, SBT and CBT Category 1, 2 and 3, are being phased out according to MARPOL regulations and are not included in this module. Ballast water carried by crude oil tankers is governed by IMO and MARPOL's stringent regulations. Because of environmental issues, new regulations require all vessels to carry a ship-specific water ballast management plan. The major concern now is to prevent biologically invasive species, such as the zebra mussel carried in ballast water taken in cargo discharge ports, which tend to destroy the delicate ecological balance at the cargo loading ports. What are the two aims of a well-planned deballasting operation? The junior officers or duty deck officers and the pumpman will normally operate the ballast pumps and carry out the deballasting operation simultaneously with the loading operation. It is important to carry out the deballasting operation as scheduled in the loading plan, both in order to avoid unwanted loads to the vessel's hull and to ensure that the ballast tanks are emptied and well drained in due time prior to topping off cargo tanks. When the deballasting operation is completed, the ballast handling records, as prescribed in the Water Ballast Management Plan, must be filled in. Two main reasons for maintaining an even keel and zero list of the vessel when topping off tanks. If the vessel is loading more than one grade of crude oil, there will be reduced rate, topping off tanks and change of grade, all which require increased attention and will normally be supervised by the chief officer. On large crude oil tankers, it is important to keep the vessel as close to even keel and zero list as possible in order to reach the correct quantity in the tanks. An even keel and zero list is also an important factor in case of an oil leakage from cargo lines or overtopping of tanks. Any oil on deck can be localized near its origin without flowing down the sloping deck. Is all sampling and ullaging of cargo tanks done through totally enclosed gauging points. When the loading is completed, the cargo surveyors, assisted by the junior officers, pumpman, boatswain with deck crew, or those assigned to take part, start the cargo survey. It is now mandatory that all sampling, dipping for water, temperature reading, and ullaging must be through enclosed sampling hatches. The gauging points are totally enclosed to allow gauging to be done without toxic and flammable gases and VOCs from the cargo tank coming into contact with air and the people doing the gauging. At the same time as the cargo survey takes place, the cargo hoses' arms are disconnected and the manifolds blanked under the supervision of the duty deck officer. When shore figures are taken to be the official final quantity of cargo loaded on board, why does the terminal require the ship's quantity calculated by the chief officer and the surveyor before releasing the cargo papers? When the cargo survey is completed, the chief officer and the cargo surveyors independently calculate the cargo, and when they are in agreement of cargo figures, the figures are given to the terminal. If the ship and shore figures are equal or within acceptable difference limits, the cargo is released and the vessel can leave the port. The loaded quantity determined by the terminal is usually taken to be the final official quantity. However, if the cargo papers, such as the bill of lading, are released before the ship has checked its own quantities and found not to be close to the terminal's figures, then the master may refuse to sign the cargo papers.